Muy buenas tardes y bienvenido a una nueva entrevista de Acinalab con tomadores de decisiones en el campo militar. Esta vez tenemos el honor de entrevistar al vicealmirante Hervé Hamelin, quien es el encargado de relaciones militares internacionales del Estado Mayor de Francia. Es un piloto naval que tiene experiencia en misiones de combate sobre Afganistán, en Kosovo también, Kosovo, en Libia también, ha sido comandante de buques, tiene una larga y destacada trayectoria y se encuentra ahora en Chile para sostener un diálogo estratégico con sus contrapartes chilenas. Y a propósito de eso y también de toda la actualidad que está ocurriendo, especialmente en Europa, a propósito de toda la situación que crea la invasión rusa a Ucrania, vamos a poder conversar con él de cómo percibe esta situación Francia, cómo ven las alianzas en este mundo actual, qué está haciendo con Chile, dónde podemos compartir experiencias. Para eso, eso sí, voy a cambiarme a inglés para adelantar la conversación. Gracias, almirante.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes y empezamos la entrevista.
Muchas gracias.
We're going to switch to English.
Thank you.
Admiral, for years and years, France has promoted a greater integration of European defense. After the Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the Trump's transactional approach to military alliances, do you think that the time has come for such integration?
This is a very timely question. Of course, with the change of administration in the US and with the war in Ukraine, it has become even more relevant than it was before. It's not a new concept. In fact, that was already an idea that was raised by General de Gaulle on the strategic autonomy, which is a word that our friends in Europe didn't like very much because they were conceiving that word as separating from the US, which is not the case. We are not intending to separate from the US, but with our neighbors and friends in the United Kingdom, we had in 1956, after the Suez campaign, a different approach to how we should manage our procurement and our strategic autonomy and independence. And so we decided at that time that we would go nuclear, that we would develop our own industry in missiles, space, and everything. And it was the basis of how it is today in France, the construction of the industry and the defense industry. So this is the result of a long-term thinking. Of course, that was recently raised as a concept to build more in the EU at first, but today we are thinking more European. So it, of course, includes the UK, Norway, other countries in Europe. It's not only an EU thing, but as Europeans, we must really take care of our future. One wake-up call was the COVID, when we realized that a lot of things were missing in Europe, and we suddenly had to import it from China or other places. So generally, I would say the mindset changed in 2020, 2021. The war in Ukraine, we realized that we were dependent on other countries to give ammunition, systems, and there was a problem of interoperability, which NATO had not solved at the time. And so building a stronger industry has been something that has raised in everybody's minds. At the same time, the EU, which was not considered as a political framework at first, which is still not considered as a military framework, although the EU has a few missions in maritime security and doing well. They are in the Balkans with Altea. So the EU is doing the job, but there is no shift in the mind in Europe where NATO is the center of the military defense of Europe. So better coordinating that with an industry that is working more in coherence with what the other countries are doing in Europe, building capabilities that are more coherent in the EU, in Europe, and within NATO is really the purpose of what is going on. On Ukraine has shown that we can gather. UMAM is a mission that has been built by the EU to train people in Ukraine. And with now a foreign policy head of foreign policy with Kaja Kallas coming from Estonia, and with a commissioner for defense, which is new in Europe, who's coming from Latvia, then we have probably a better understanding of the balance in Europe between the East and West and South and North, where, of course, the questions are, and strategic questions are different. But when the integrity of Europe is at stake, which is the case with Ukraine now, it's a good moment. So yes, it is happening, but of course it's not easy because we have dependencies, including France. We have dependencies on the US, but that's okay as long as we can manage them and we can work closely with the US. The interesting point is that it's not Donald Trump who raised the fact that the Europeans should do more. It was already stated by Bill Clinton a few years ago, saying at some point the Europeans will have to realize they have to do more. So we are there, and hopefully we'll organize in a moment where we don't really have the choice.
Recently, the European Union launched a new white book of the. Basically, they explained this initiative of rearm Europe and put 800,000 million euros over the table to develop defense capabilities. How is the reaction of the people in Europe? Is the people are understanding the emergency right now, or the context?
I think people are realizing that there is an emergency, and of course, it's balanced in all countries, but overall, people realize that there is an urgency to do something first for Ukraine, because we see Russia step by step going towards their objectives, which is not good for the future of Europe, because they won't stay there, so they will go further. And also we realize that we sometimes depend too much on other. So having that approach in Europe, building something within the EU, but in coherence with NATO, and I think this is the most important thing, is that it's not building capabilities for building capabilities. It's building capabilities to fill gaps, and these gaps are identified in the NATO defense planning process. And so it is really a way of saying the military structure is NATO, and NATO is in fact based on what member states are providing. And so these member states, they share money. Out of these 800, 650 are already shared between the countries. And the extra 150 we'll have to see how it works. But is it a loan and how it works? But this money is more efficient when it's put together in the same way that if every country is doing it. So this is the general idea. And I was personally surprised, but we had a lot of talks in NATO about the GDP, these 2%, and a lot of people and countries were reluctant to go any further. Now you hear about 3.5. So people realize the threat is there, and we'll have to do something. Will it mean we'll do it? That's another thing. But yes, the opinions I think are ready.
Recently, President Emmanuel Macron, in a public speech, has offered to extend the French nuclear umbrella to its European partners. How broad and effective is this umbrella?
So that's a question that is just shared now in Europe, and people are wondering. So what does it mean? And so first, I would say that it's not a new idea. Even General de Gaulle was already saying that we have to envisage it. Not only it does not really have borders. So that nuclear deterrence doesn't have border. Second point, nuclear deterrence is not a tactical thing. People talk about numbers. We shouldn't be talking about numbers. This is a political will on one side, and the credibility of being capable of on the other side. So this is what nuclear deterrence is. When you, after that, you try to think if there is something happening in Europe that is very strong for Europeans and very against Europeans, will it mean something for France? Will it mean something for the UK, for Germany? Probably. So this is in that mindset that we went on a first step with the UK in the Lancaster House agreements. Part of the Lancaster House agreements, one of these agreements is about nuclear. So there was a joint nuclear committee where we have declared that something happening to the UK should have implications on France. So we have probably vital interests that are in common, although we don't define vital interests because it's the sensitivity of the moment, and of course it's a political decision that has to be made. But considering that something happening in Europe is not a problem for France would be probably a mistake. That's why this idea of how can we, in fact, the UK and France, the two nuclear countries in Europe, can do something for the other ones. And that nuclear thing is very relevant today. Would have Russia invaded Ukraine if they were not nuclear? They might have done it, but we would have solved that a long time ago. The accumulated forces in Europe are stronger than what is in Russia. So the capabilities are there, but that nuclear narrative from Russia has been part of it. You have the same thing with Iran, close to nuclear. You have the same thing with North Korea, harassing, aggressing the neighbors and everyone because they are nuclear. So this nuclear matter is something very relevant today that we really have to consider, and it is part also of NATO deterrence. So this is a very timely question.
As you know, France is a multi-continental country with territories spread across the globe, even in the Americas. How is the current security crisis in Europe affecting the attention to other areas such as the Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's a problem of priorities. Yeah. And of course, the priorities for defense now is, I would say, homeland, of course. And following the previous question, homeland is Europe in the mindset of France. And so the first priority is obviously on Europe with the Ukraine crisis. The second priority is our trade, our prosperity. It goes through the Indian Ocean and through the Middle East, the Red Sea. So the Middle East is the second one. A third one is Africa, because it's a neighborhood and this is a growing continent with a lot of challenges, including migration, including demography that will spread. So where is the Indo-Pacific in that? For France, it's very specific because the Indo-Pacific is part of the first priority because it's homeland too for us. So we have 1.6 million people living in the Indo-Pacific. It's most of our economic zone. It's taking a lot of our news recently. So there has been New Caledonia. There has been the hurricanes in Mayotte, the hurricane in Réunion Island. So we are very much committed in that. So this allocation of priorities is not easy with such a territory. That's where partnerships are so important. And the the French Indo-Pacific strategy is really based on partnership. It's based on two pillars, one being the Indian Ocean, the other one being the Pacific Ocean, and it's based on three layers. The first layer is the local layer, is the sovereignty, the territory, the economic zone, and making sure that we don't have illegal fishing or migration in our waters. The second one is the regional one. It's the Indian Ocean community of islands in the Indian Ocean. It's the Pacific Islands in southwestern Pacific, with challenges that are from climate change to security problems that are based on undersea cables, on state-to-state possibilities. And the third one is the global one, is working with bigger partners. In the Indian Ocean, the big partners are India, the UAE in the north, and India up to the south, and Australia. When you look at the Pacific, on the west side, it's New Zealand and Australia. Of course, the US, Canada are present in the north, but in the south, it's on the west, Australia, New Zealand, and in the east is Chile. And so these with huge distances. And so these nations that are the most capable in the area we all have our duty to do. That's why we do exercises together, and this is the way we try to maintain. But of course, huge distances and real problem of planning.
Yes, and in the same sense, so what is the attention being paid to partners as Chile? We want to believe that we are partners in the Polynesia. Of course, you mentioned huge distances, but Papeete, Tahiti, Easter Island are really some kind of close.
The Indo-Pacific for us starts in the Red Sea and does include Latin America and also the western part of Canada, where Canada is for French people most of the time they look Canada on the east coast because there is the French-speaking Quebec and everything, but Canada is on both sides. The capable countries in the north are Canada, the US, Mexico, but in the south, Chile is the strongest partner we have in the area. With other partners, of course, we work with all partners. And I know Alpasi, with our Pacific Command, is having regular meetings with the Navy, because it's mostly in the maritime domain that we cooperate in the area, because it's a huge maritime area with a lot of challenges. We were talking about the undersea cables that go from Latin America to Australia, going through the Polynesia. We have maritime security, traffics, narco traffics, illegal fishing. All of this, we cannot tackle it ourselves. And the combination of efforts is really rewarding. It is working. And so we are participating to the RIMPAC exercise together. I think there was the FREM Bretagne. I was with the with a frigate, Chilean frigate, Colonel recently. We set exercises in Polynesia. That is the sorry. We have an exercise there, a HLR exercise. We also have Croix du Sud in New Caledonia. And so these exercises are mostly based on human assistance and disaster relief, because this is one of the existential threats for our partners that are islands, and we see quite often problems in that area. So gathering efforts, training together, having better procedures is very important. To share the burden on these wide areas, but also to concentrate efforts on trying to anticipate as much as we can.
These days, Chile and France are conducting a strategic dialogue. Which new fields of cooperation are you looking? I mean, and during the conversations you mentioned many times the undersea cables, for example, and your Navy published a lot of documents about the importance of the seabed in terms of resources and connections, digital connections.
I think we have to work on the global commons in general. So the global commons, it's cyber with artificial intelligence, and there is a cooperation between France and Chile in artificial intelligence. That is probably something we can also dig. It's more on the civilian side today, but maybe tomorrow we'll have to work on the military side. Space, obviously. Understanding what's happening in space, that's the first step. And space is paramount for operations, because it is positioning, this is also identifying, this is also communications. So space is paramount for operations, so we have to work together. On the maritime domain in itself, you don't have a lot of spaces today where the access is difficult. You see a lot of private companies now going in space with constellation and everything. The undersea and the bottom of the seas is still a place where it's difficult to access. And so we hide our submarines there. So the submarine warfare is still very relevant today. And it's very important to master the areas around your own territory, not having other submarines coming there. But if you go below that, we know that most of our communications go through cables more than space. So this is a weakness that was already identified by the Brits in World War I. as a weakness. But now today you have capabilities. Our competitors have capabilities to cut the wire and do a lot of stuff. You have seen in the Baltics. So there is a mission now to survey. And this is the economy beyond the military capabilities that is at stake. So we really have to defend them on understanding the specificities of the continental shelves of what we can do on huge areas is something probably we can dig on. In the maritime domain, we can probably do better also in countering illegal activities. I was mentioning narco traffics, but it's also human trafficking sometimes. Not that much in the Eastern Pacific, but it's the case in the Western Pacific, in the Indian Ocean. So it could be there. It's also illegal fishing, which is happening everywhere, on where we really have to share information. And that information sharing is probably the basis of a little bit of everything. Making sure we have the right information at the right time and we share it to the people who can act. And we mentioned distances. Yeah. And so there is no way we can react quickly from Polynesia to the east side of the Pacific, where Chile can. So I think this exchange of information is something we probably have to do more. But there are plenty of subjects, unfortunately, because there is a lot of challenges. So plenty of common ground to work.
And just to finish and going back to basics, there's any conversation between France and Chile about arms sales, transfers? As maybe you know, we have French warships. Chile wants to build its own warships, and also we need to replace all submarines. So there's a great history about connections between our navies, about sharing the same equipment.
Yes, I think we are all glad that there is a long cooperation between Chile and France in the armament and procurement. We hope that Chile is satisfied with the ships and submarines that they have. And of course, we're working on keeping that cooperation. It's very important, because when you think it's not a product when you have a ship or when you have tanks or airplanes, helicopters. It's not a product. It's a capability, and capability is not only the material. It's the doctrine. And we work on doctrine with Chile. It's also people, and we have people training. Of course, distances are very very long, so we don't have big numbers, but we have in the army we have the mountain teams, companies from France working in a different mountain environment here, and reciprocally. So it's doctrine, it's people, it's the systems themselves, and it's the training you have behind. So it's easier to work and train together when you have similar systems that you operate. So, but of course, Chile is totally sovereign, so we will be happy to keep working. But there is a big competition on systems. On a lot of our partners are doing good stuff too. So,
not talking about training, by your personal experience about training in Esmeralda. Huh?
Yes, I really enjoyed that training in Esmeralda. That was great because we have only two small sailing boats in France, and the experience of being on the La Dama Blanca and sailing with mates it was a great experience. And it's a sailor experience because it's really a sailing ship. When we tend to train more on after, same for the cadets in Chile, then you have to go on a frigate on work in a team with weapons and equipment. But you have to learn the sea, and it's hard. You never master the sea. You start learning a little bit, and you learn that you are small and weak compared to the sea. So that's the first thing, and the second part of it is people, is teaming, is the team, and waiting for 6 hours, the moment where you all have to go do the same thing together and be efficient. That's only the addition of the effort that make the result. That's a great moment, and I'm glad we kept in touch with some of my friends, and every time I meet somebody from the Navy, the Chilean Navy, I was defense attaché in the UK. That's always a pleasure to meet my friends from Chile.
Well, thanks, Admiral. Merci, Hamelin, for this interview.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.